So good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Enbridge Consulting webinar today. We're looking at a brand new smart solution which has been developed by the Enbridge Consulting team. And this is an extraction tool made for Unit 4 Business World. As you will have already seen, there is a chat button, so please use that to interact with us today. We'll have a Q&A session after the demonstration. Tiago will take you through a brief demo of the solution, and then we'll answer any questions that you have later on. Tiago.
Hello, Tracy. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining us, and I'll pass over to you for the demonstration.
Okay. I hope everyone can see my screen now.
I can certainly see your screen, Tiago.
Okay. So document extract solution came from a need or from a request from a customer where in an audit for audit purposes there was a need to download a batch load of documents that were part of set of transactions. So and I'm going to start with the demonstration right now, in which there's a browser inquiry which shows us a list of transactions, and based on this need for this need for audit purposes, there was a list of transactions that need to be audited, but at the same time the auditors need to see the files that made the transactions, or the files that were associated with these transactions on the document archive. So for instance, opening this browser we have here in the so this is a financial browser, also a browser from the financial general ledger. So we have these transactions in which if I open my document archive, I can see, in this case, the files associated with it. And then the tool mostly extracts. So if we have this browser with this set of transactions, the tool ends up associating and extracting the files that are combined or that are part of all these transactions. So in a really quick setup, in which after the browser is kind of done, after refreshing, there's this document export button that it's set up set up in Business World, and then it's going to help us to download the whole information. So I have now here also ready my data export folder, because this is where the files are going to end. So I'm going to press the button, and I'm going to have a message saying that there's a server process that was ordered, which is going to ordered with a number 39. And hopefully here it is. So here is the folder. So it creates a folder with a dump of all the files that were, that are part of this browser inquiry here. Okay, this solution works as well on the web browser with the same nature, and if it's associated with the document archive, all set up, and if the browser is set up on the web, it can be used in the same way. So for instance, I have a browser that beforehand I made regarding projects. So in this case, it's just a browser that I called project stuff. So this is a browser made on the project cost and billing area on the project model. So it's a browser that ends up showing us a list of the of some projects, and which actually this example that I have in here is actually show the exceptions. So when the situation when the browser is kind of set up, and when something is not properly set up correctly, you end up having this messages. So you end up having some really cool error handling on the solution as well. Now I am going to jump to the other one that we have. In this case, it's a browser for suppliers contract. So it's a simple browser looking at the supplier master file, in which we have a set of suppliers. And in this case, the case scenario would be, we have a set of suppliers, and then we have associated to the master file, contracts. And I'm just going to open one total recall. So okay, so I have this supplier with this two contracts associated with it. and I have this other badger. There's a company which also has like a contract associated with it. So this is a browser done on desktop, and I'm going to show now the same browser created on the web. So we kind of exported and got this browser set up on the web. And in the same way that we have this inquiry set on desktop, and then exported, or in this case published on the web, the same button is going to be available in here. And in the same way, so I'm just going to get my document export folder ready here, on the same way that it exported on all the files. I'm going to press document export. I'm going to receive a message just saying that the process had run, and it has number 40. It actually gives the folder like the same name, just to identify that this is the run that we did. And if I open the folder, here we go, I end up having the files, well, basically the files that are associated with this browser and that are part of the document archive. Now, after the solution is loaded, there's a little bit of setup. I don't want to go too much in detail on the technical setup, but when it's loaded, there's just some bits and pieces that we need to define. First, define which browsers are going to receive this type of link, and then on the system setup values. And this is why this solution, I'm just going to drive to the system setup values. This is why this solution ends up being really dynamic, because you can define, your browser, and then you say what document type is associated with the browser, and then the name of the browser if it's if it's associated on the web. So after this solution is installed, everything then obviously ends up being documented on the user guide. But after the solution is installed, the super user from the customer side just needs to set up a browser and make sure that the indexes that we have on our document type are set up in the browser. So for instance, in this case, the supplier GL. So if I just quickly open my document type for GL supply invoice. So I'm just going to open this. Okay, so this is my document type on the document archive defined, and I have this indexes, which is the client, transaction, the supplier number, and the invoice number. So the customer only needs to make sure that it creates a browser with the exact same names that match the document archive. So, well, the client is not needed, but at least the transaction number, the supplier ID, and the invoice number needs to be here. And if that is set up, as soon as we have on the other end saying that this browser is going to receive or going to be subject to this document export button. So any browser in business world, as soon as this kind of setup is done, will end up being enabled to download in bulk this whole set of files. It's available for customers that have implementations on premises, but also it was actually our first solution that got approved for to work in Unit 4 Cloud. Customers have their implementation on Unit 4 Cloud. This is available right now for Unit 4 Cloud implementations or installations. And some of the feedback that we already had for the second version is, having a different set of folders or have a different folder structure. So mostly this is our document extract for business world. So in a nutshell, after implementing, the user creates a browser, associates the browser to the document type, and then just dumps all the document that are associated with that browser to a folder. Okay, now I'm going to hand over to Tracy.
Thanks very much for that demonstration, Tiago. We're just waiting for a few questions to come through.
Okay.
So I've got one question coming up from one of the participants, and that is about development of the solution in terms of bespoking this for individual customers. I think you've mentioned briefly about developing this in line with further requirements. So we'll be doing more development on this.
Yeah, well, well, the solution ended up being created based on a requirement of a customer that needed, based on the browser, to dump all the information to a folder. Now, as soon as we end up creating something, there's always other needs, and there's always other customers that want to have different flavors. Now, as soon as we developed this, there was automatically in one of the demos that we did for a customer, there was also automatically the need to create a different folder structure, and then a different folder structure per document type. If I have a browser, like in this case for suppliers, it's just a folder with all the supplier information. But if I'm on a project, and the project end up having a different folder structure, because I can have more or less projects. I can have more or less work orders within the project. So the folder structure, if I want to extract information for a project, is going to be one, but the folder structure for downloading information, let's say for the GL analysis, for the auditors, for the GL analysis, might be different. And then if it's a really nice feature, ends up being incorporated in the next version.
Okay, Tiago, thank you for that. Then I'd like to thank Tiago for joining us today and giving that brief demonstration. And thank you to the attendees for joining us today. And do look out for our next webinar, which will be presented in January. Thank you again, and thank you, Tiago.
Okay, thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.